Hi guys, welcome to Crafty Chat episode 14. My name is Nancy. I'm here today with Heidi and Lucy, and we're also welcoming a special guest, Toby. He's another staff member at the library. Toby, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what your hobbies are.
Yeah, sure. My name is Toby. I work at the library with you guys. I'm a technician in the youth department. So I do some story times and other youth-related programming, as well as a lot of stuff in the Secret Lab downstairs, and then the new Secret Lab space, the Secret Lab Annex. So a lot of programming around a lot of the making stuff that we do, 3D printers, the craft cutters, the Cricuts. No, I'm sorry, we have the silhouettes. Yes.
We have the silhouettes, yeah.
Yep, so the silhouettes, we've been doing vinyl stickers there. And we've got the laser cutter engraver going down there in the Secret Lab. So we've been doing programming with that, some cool stuff there. And then at the end of last year, in the beginning of this year, I started offering introductory wood carving programs at the library, and that was a really big success so far. A lot of people are interested in it, and that was one of the ways that I was able to bring one of my personal hobbies into the library, and we're also looking to expand that. So we've got a ton of new equipment. I was down there the other day picking up some supplies, and table saw is in there, the chop saw, the drill press, and all that. So everyone pay attention, you know, when we get back to being in the library, as far as programming revolving around those kinds of things. So my crafty hobbies, I guess my most crafty one is woodworking. I do a little bit of sewing. I've made some wearables sewing wise. But if it's not music, if it's not cooking, if it's not sewing, then the craftiest thing I do, is the woodworking. And I do a few different forms of it, like carving. And then I also do a lot of stuff on the lathe. So I'm really excited to share some information with you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, that was, I'm so excited to hear that we got all those woodworking tools and that they're already here and that's coming, because that was, I've talked a couple times of like my favorite thing to watch on YouTube when I'm not doing it, just need something to watch, is lathe turning videos.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like woodworking and turning videos are really fun to me. So if we happen to get a lathe at the library, I would love to learn. So Toby's also the person who taught me how to use the laser cutter, and then we worked on the silhouettes together, and we're looking to expand the number of machines that we have in the library for the silhouettes. So that was really exciting. It is really exciting. But yeah, that's lost my train of thought.
That's okay. I have a little narrative I can share with you guys.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the questions I always get asked when we were doing the wood carving programs is how did I get started in that? You know, what drew me to it? And I always love to tell people that it was my aunt. My aunt, who is in her mid to late 70s right now. She has carved almost all of her life. And I remember going to her house, and she had these beautiful, because she also raised Great Danes. So a lot of her carvings were of Danes. And that's a cool subject because of their length, you know, the size of them, the long legs, the big body, the ears, right? That's they're all interesting aspects to carve. So, yeah, she had a ton of them sitting around the house in all sorts of different woods. A lot of the harder woods that I don't necessarily carve with because I stick to basswood pretty much, but she had it in buckeye and cherry and that kind of thing, and they were all so beautiful. And so as I got a little bit older, I didn't go immediately to carving, but I started to do some outdoor furniture, birdhouses, that kind of thing. And then as I got even older, I moved into the lathes, and then I went ahead and bought myself a carving set, and went from there. And so that was really cool. And then I was able to bring it to the library. I brought a couple of the carvings that we've done at the library. So this one is a real simple one. It's a wolf, right? A howling wolf, which is kind of a traditional motif in the Southwest. Real simple shape. We worked on that one. And then this one is one of my new favorites. This little guy. Oh, yeah. So I started with the wolf, and then I found a YouTuber whose name is Doug Linker, and I've described him as the woodworking Bob Ross. And then he gets comments like that in all of his videos. Man, you are the Bob Ross of woodworking. And so the owl was one of his designs. I also started a bear. That's one of his designs. So working on those. And then, so that's really helped me expand what I can do just by looking at simplicity. Like the owl, this started as a 1 inch by 1 inch by 2 3/4 inch block of wood. So instead of cutting blanks like I did for these, where I actually cut out most of the shape but left it in a big square, you can really carve a lot of stuff out of a, you know, a particular size block. It doesn't have to look like what you're carving when you start. You can see that the bear is a lot more square, and I started removing materials for that. So those are some of the cool ones that we've done at the library. And that's kind of what I'm into. The last time I went out to my cottage, I was there with my cousin, and he was finishing up the new shed that he was building. And so, staying socially distant, I sat there and carved an owl that I could use to grace the brand new shed. So it's just something cool to have your hands on while you're relaxing, working, talking, that kind of thing. So,
what kind of tools do you use when you're hand carving? Like, is there a specific set of knives that are common?
So, yeah, the ones we have at the library are all Flex Cut brand. There's several different brands of carving knives. I started with the Flex Cut because that's what was available at the Woodcraft store in Canton, which is a woodworking specific retail store. And so I've got the one right here. This is just a Flex Cut roughing knife. So it's got a nice wood handle on it. And then this one is the roughing knife, and I can do the whole owl with just the one knife, because it's first, you learn how to handle it. It comes factory sharp, and then I learned that the best thing to use with it is just a simple knife strop, which is just a piece of leather tacked onto a piece of wood. And then there's different stropping compounds. And so this knife was in pretty rough shape because I had never sharpened it, and the blade had some pits in it, right? So I used a diamond sharpener to sharpen it. And then I did 100 draws on one side of the knife, then 100 on the other, then 99, then 99, all the way down to 0. It took me like an hour and a half, but this thing, if you hold up a piece of paper, you can just run it right along the paper and it cuts it perfectly. So the knife strop is a really important piece. The roughing knife or cutting knife we use at the library, we use a cutting knife, and then we also have a detail knife for each set of carver. For each carver has the detail knife, the cutting knife. And those seem to be, all the tools that you really need. If you master one and you make sure to keep your knife sharp, you can do quite a bit of carving on just those with just those few tools there. So yeah,
that's I've actually had to do some knife sharpening, like manual knife sharpening, when I was in college and I was doing my archaeology field camp the last year that I was in college. One of the things on the tool list was like, oh, you're going to need a trowel. But like buy a standard garden trowel and then you're going to need to sharpen it. I was like, why would you need to sharpen a trowel? So they were like, well, you're going to need like 2 different sets of files plus a grindstone and a strop. I was like, okay, cool. So I'm gonna find all these things, gathered it all up. It took me a week to, because they had like specific specifications of like the blade needs to be this thick, the bevel needs to be this big, and it was like we spent the first 3 days of field camp just talking about our tools and trying to get like those trowels in the right sharpness, because you do actually need them to cut the side, like the dirt of a side of a hole, because archaeology is very specific of like it's a meter by meter square, all the measurements have to be exact, so it's you're literally using a knife to cut dirt. And it was one of the strangest things at the time that I had done of like, why am I spending 3 days sharpening this trowel?
Did you get yours real sharp?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it would cut paper. Like it would cut paper easily.
Mm-hmm.
And it stayed that sharp for a long time. I didn't have to sharpen it very often, which was great, but it's just, yeah. Knife sharpening is actually kind of fun in a cathartic kind of zen way.
Yeah.
I thought it was fun. So.
Yeah. And it's so important to the actual hand carving. You can get real frustrated really easily if your knife is not sharp. So, super important.
Yeah, it always starts with the tools. You know, any craft project, you got to know your tools and know how to take care of them. So I'm waiting for that sewing machine maintenance video from you, Nancy.
Yep, that's on the docket. Yeah, because I had more stuff that I could film because I was sewing my own project and I had a jam. So I managed to pull my phone out and do a couple shots of like, this is what happens when a sewing machine jams and this is how you fix it. So,
and I'm just like, yeah, cool. Like, why? That's not really cool, but useful.
It's very useful. And it's just, I feel so stupid whenever something goes wrong with my sewing machine because 99% of the time, it's just that it needs to be rethreaded. It's just the dumbest thing to me of like, it's a sewing machine. This should not be a problem. But it's like, no, you just rethread it and it works fine. Ugh. Very frustrating, but
yeah. It's funny too how much you had to count. Like when you're sharpening, you're saying, it was 100 and then 100. Yeah. It's like, I was thinking about that when I was knitting the other day or when I'm doing crochet. It's like I do so much time counting. I really should be learning another language to count in or something for as much time as I spend. Just that
would be a good way to get some new languages under your belt, right?
Maybe. But I'm already
like when I was little, my mom would just always be like, like counting her knitting stitches. So she'd be like 50, 51. If I was interrupting her, like, it's just like finished, Yeah. And now I do the same thing to my family constantly.
I just like don't respond usually. And then Greg's like, oh, you're counting. I'm like,
or I start counting out loud, like, so they know.
Yep. I would count out loud louder when my brother would try to interrupt me of like, no, I just shut up. I'm trying to count.
Yeah. So anyways, completely off the path, but.
Well,
So what else? Did you have some other stuff? I thought you had some other stuff.
I did, yeah. So I mentioned that I carved that owl specifically to put in the new shed out there. And I'm sure you guys have this too as far as crafting goes, but I think one of the things that I really enjoy when I'm working on a specific piece is what or who I'm making it for. So I have a couple pieces that I did on the lathe, and of course these are the ones that I've given to my wife because they're here at my house. They're not at someone else's. So this is a box that I made for my wife. Yep. So the wood I chose was Bocote, Bocote. And that's one of Steph's favorite woods. And so this was actually the box that I put the ring in to propose to her. So thank you. I made it on the lathe, like I said, Bocote, and then I finished it just with some paste wax. And it just fits. If you look,
nice.
The lid is it fits right inside there. So then it's flushed on all sides there. So that was one.
Gorgeous wood.
It is. It's very pretty. And then this one is one that I'm super proud of. So we moved into our home in 2018 and we got married in July of 2019. And when we moved in here, we pulled up the carpets and there was hardwood floor. And in the one room I had to replace a bit of that hardwood floor. And so I pulled up the old boards, and then when I had made pens before, so this is one of the pens that I've made on the lathe, and I've made them for friends for significant occasions. So for one of our friends, I made the pen to sign their marriage license with. And so I wanted to do the same thing for us. And we went to the Woodcraft together, and we were trying to pick out wood. And she said, well, why don't you use oak, right? And I'm using Bacote and Purple Heart and all these different exotic woods. And she says, why don't you just use oak? And I said, okay, well, that's fine, but it's just not, there's not a ton of meaning behind that, except when you use a piece of your oak hardwood floor that you pulled up at your home to make the pen. So that's what I did. I took a piece of the floorboard, I cut it and put it on the lathe, and finished it real nice. This is one of my best ones that I've ever made, but I think that's because I knew exactly what I was making it for. I'm sure you guys have similar experiences of just getting so into a project if you're making it specifically for someone. So those are two of the pieces that I did in that vein.
Yeah, I put a lot of work and time into the box that I was going to use to give our wedding bands to my husband. And I was just a prefab box, but I sanded it and carved it a little bit and wood burned a design into the top and stained it and made velvet velvet holders for the inside, because our wedding was going to be tree and bark themed, because our wedding bands are branch patterned. They look like branches. And I was just trying to hide that from him in a 2-bedroom apartment. It was extremely hard. I don't know how I managed, but he was really surprised, and that was really great. So that level of, I don't know, I love that personalization for gifts for people of I take what I know about that person and then try to find something that will be meaningful to them, which for some folks can be a catch-22 of well, I think this is what you like, but I'm not really sure. My cousin loves to tell stories of she got an owl tattoo on the inside of her arm, and then for the next decade, everybody would buy her owl stuff, and she was like, I just got this design on a whim. I don't really like owls even that much, but it kind of just informed everyone's buying decisions for the next decade. So I think it's fun. It's a fun little puzzle, and it adds a level of interest and meaning and emotional investment into projects for me.
Yeah, because I don't necessarily just pick up and go. You know what I'm saying? My setup, I have it set up, but I've got to get out my box of tools, and kind of get in that mind frame. So it's not something that I just, I got nothing to do for the next hour. Let me, make a pen or start on this particular project. A lot of the stuff that I do is driven by sentiment of, making something for someone or things like that. So, yeah.
Well, that's also those sentimental pieces and those handmade gifts. I love that. That's I don't want to say it's like a drug. It's a terrible analogy, but I was I love that shit. It's I am all about that. So it's my favorite thing is personalized gifts and things you put a lot of thought into. It's just so cool to me. So you were telling Heidi and I the story of that pen that you were making last year, and I was just oh my god, oh my god, that's amazing. I freaked out. It was very cute. So.
It was a good use, and that's another cool thing about wood is that I have chunks of wood that my aunt started working on and has since, because she's getting older, not been able to do as much with. So I've got chunks of stuff that she's given me. She had a bunch of pieces that were part of a wooden merry-go-round where you would wind it up with string and then let it go. But I can take those, glue them together, you know, because they're already cut out flat circle discs, I can glue them together, make something completely different, but it has that, you know, particular meaning, or, you know, I got it from her, that kind of thing too. So we went out to my place. We got there at 10 o'clock and a giant oak tree had fallen about 2 hours before we got there. And so we had to cut it all up, and I took a big chunk of it home and I made bowls for the 3 guys, my dad, my cousin, and my brother-in-law. I made them all bowls, and gave them bowls out of that particular tree that's, you know, that was there, which is why wood is cool, right? Because you're connected to the nature. It might be if you had your own sheep, right? And we're spinning your own wool, like you knew where it came from or something like that. So that's why the wood is really cool. We cut our magnolia tree. I carved a face out of that, and that sits in my wife's indoor garden, her houseplant garden. So you can really get that interaction between nature and everything else. I really like that. That's one of the reasons why I like working with wood. So
there's a lot of social sentimentality to trees too. That was, yeah, I have a big connection to trees and a lot of tree motifs. And it's like, when I was first getting into paganism, the wand that I made was from the maple tree in my backyard. That was my favorite tree growing up. I would hold on to, I have lilac branches that I've had from my mom's garden for almost 20 years that I've just been waiting for the right thing to use them for. So, and like even my dad has come to me, he drove all the way to his brother's in Virginia to pick up some 2-inch by 12-inch black walnut boards. They're 12-foot long boards that his dad pulled out of a reclaimed house in like 1978 or something. And my brother or my uncle was like, these are just sitting in our garage, you know, do you want these? And my dad planed one down and made a mantle for his new condo. And like that kind of, you know, it's got that that sentimentality of like, there's a lot of meaning that gets put into those kind of things. So that's, woodworking projects are kind of cool for me in that regard.
People take that pretty far. I was working at a nursery in Indiana, and a guy came in and he had a real thick Southern accent, and he showed me a handful of acorns, and he said, I got these, they're white oak. I got these from my parents' house in Mississippi. Do you think I can plant them in my yard here? Right. And think about the commitment to like planting a tree and waiting for it to grow up like that. So yes, Nancy, you're completely right about that sentimentality.
The reclaimed wood, you do see a lot now. Like it reminds me of your floorboard, Toby, or Nancy talking about reclaimed wood, but you see more and more pieces, like even if it's furniture, made with reclaimed wood these days, which is a nice cycle as well, because you're using something that was already used, but then it probably has or could have sentimental value. So woodworking is kind of cool that way, that you can take something that's in nature or something that's already been used.
Yep.
I love pallet furniture. I was all for that craze several years ago in DIY culture of like make everything out of pallets.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool.
No, I was just going to chime in. I mean, I would talk about clay, but it's kind of similar in that way. And it was a tradition, I think primarily in Japan. I remember hearing about this, but like, you know, they would make the clay and bury it in the ground because as it sits, it ages and that improves its plasticity. And then that would be given to the next, you know, person in the generation. So it's like you're always be passing along the clay, which is really interesting. And I never really dug my own clay, but I did, you know, always mix my own clay from the powders and everything. And there were certain batches that definitely, you know, they had a special feeling, or I can still see those pots. And it's like, I remember, you know, making that clay. And I got rid of most of my stuff because I was just like, I don't have room for this anymore. And I was like, I gave my clay away, but I did keep one bin. I was holding on to it. It's probably, gosh, it's probably getting close to like 10 years old now. So it's probably really nice clay, but I don't know when I'll ever get to use it. So
one of my friends from back home, he's mixing his own clay for pottery from his own yard.
Yeah.
From his house. And like watching his progression of like, you know, start to finish and all the failures along the way, and like his commentary has been really fun and interesting and kind of hilarious in a way. But he's getting a lot better, and he's actually coming up with pieces that aren't breaking in the kiln.
That's exciting.
Actually, it's very exciting, and I was really, really geeked for him about that. But like that brings up in my mind of like the not necessarily like hereditary nature of crafting, but that like personal history aspect to handmade things. So like woodworking things that get passed down for generations, or resources that are, you know, passed down to kids, grandkids, whether it be like clay or pieces of wood or something that's already finished. Like I've always thought that was really interesting, that there is that generational concept for a lot of folks with handmade items.
It's almost like a hyper localized folk art tradition, right? Like you can trace a lineage back, you know, like my grandma made this, my dad made this and that, but well,
and even the skills that you learn to do it. I mean, like Toby, you were saying you got interested because your aunt showed you, and I think like back to a lot of our fiber arts labs, you'll have people come and say like, I haven't crocheted forever, but my grandmother taught me when I was little, or there's like so much of that. You hear about that lineage, and a lot of times it is within the family or somebody very close to the family, that even if it was something you did when you were little and you left it behind, people are always kind of coming back to that stuff. So
yeah,
absolutely.
I love that aspect about people. Of like, I did this years and years and years ago, why don't I try that again? Or like that persistence of memory of, you know, I want to do this again, or I want to try it or revisit it. I've always thought that that was kind of magical about just people in general. It's cool. I love when folks walk into a program or into a fiber lab and say, well, I did this years ago, here's the story of how and why I did it. And it's so fun to hear folks' stories like that.
Yeah,
it kind of makes what we're doing into something bigger than just hosting a program. Yeah. It becomes like an exercise in humanity almost.
Yeah.
But
that is the joy of programming. A lot of times is that interacting with our community and helping create more of a community too, because there's a lot of people that return to, you know, the programs, and they get to know each other, you know, and you just see each other in that way. And it's
yeah,
very nice.
I'm very keenly missing that community aspect. Now that we're like 2.5, 3 months into not having programming, I'm just like, I miss it a lot. So
yeah. So something else. Oh, go ahead, Toby.
No, go ahead, Heidi.
I was just gonna say, I know you also do a lot of 3D printing. So I was gonna ask you about that. That's not something handed down.
Yeah. So you led me in. You led me in right the way I wanted. So the library several years ago acquired something like a dozen 3D printers. They were Printerbot Simple Metals. It's on the lower end of the price scale for 3D printers go. They work great, things like that. And then the programming for that kind of fell off. And then last year we acquired two newer ones. They're Lulzbot Taz 6 3D printers. They got almost a cubic foot of bed space to print on. And I'm a big fan of the 3D printers. And a lot of times when people think of the 3D printers, they think of, you want to make a little figurine or some sort of knick-knack thing. But I've really embraced it as a utilitarian kind of thing. So creating like useful objects, right, out of the off of the 3D printer. So one of my favorite ones is the story team at the library. A lot of us will use Limberjacks to do the song Knees Up Mother Brown, where we bounce them. Dun, 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 dun. So Miss Laura, who was leaving at the time, left me a couple of Limberjacks, and one little fellow was missing his leg from the knee down. So instead of, I could have made one out of wood, but I wanted to challenge myself. So I designed a brand new leg from the knee down on the 3D printer and printed that. And that's just kind of the type of problem solving that I think the 3D printer is super useful for. And so when we've been doing our programs for 3D printing, we really focus on design. So come in and play with the design software and design your own object and then print that. And people have brought in and just fooled around with the printer and made some objects, but other people have very specific things in mind when they brought in their ideas to plan, design, and print those objects. And I'm not saying that, the little knickknacks and figurines aren't like really cool to do, but I'm really into the utilitarian side of printing, useful things that you can integrate into, because you can print anything you want. So if you're missing X, Y, or Z from A, B, or C, there's no reason why you couldn't try and replicate that and make it useful. So that's one of the things that I'm really excited with about the 3D printers. And I think we're up to a dozen. We had to get rid of a few of them because they, after heavy use, ended up breaking. But the 3D printers in the library are a good resource. And like I said, we're focusing on design. So if anyone at home is listening and wants to get a head start on that, Autodesk makes a product called Tinkercad. It's web-based, and you just create an account and can log on, and you can start creating 3D designs right there. So when we eventually open back up, and you might have an idea of something that, you need a new handle for your, grill or something like that, you can use that program to design. And then when the printers are available, you can bring that into print. It's a really cool, it's kind of simple. It's really user-friendly. That's the Tinkercad is a cool product that you can start exploring right now, so.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just curious what is like the limit to the size of something that our printers can print?
So that's a good question, Heidi. Like I said, the print bed of the Lulzbots is about 11 inches by 11 inches by 11 inches. So it's almost a cubic foot, but something that took up that much space, would probably take a day or two, maybe more to print. So we try and encourage people to keep them small. When we run the programs, if you do a design and it can be printed within the 2-hour program, then we're glad to have you do that. But if you have something that requires a little bit more printing time, we've been doing printing and pickup service. So, leave your design with us, give us a couple weeks, we'll print it and then put it on the hold shelf for you. But something, like I said, something that big, real big, if you wanted a full-size bust of your head, right? Like, that's going to take quite a bit of time. So we encourage people to keep it on the smaller side, but if there's something that you're dying for, I know one patron was interested, and tell me if you guys know this term, a nitty knotty?
Yep.
Okay.
I know what that is.
So, it's a tool for knitting, right?
Yep. It's there's so like a knotty is I've actually got one right here. Hold on. A knotty is a wrapping tool of how to make. So this is how you would wrap a hank of yarn around after you spin it. So when it's finished, and then it's easy to tie the hank and twist it into a skein of yarn. So that's like a knotty that's what that is. But like a nitty knotty, I've seen some companies like they call nitty knotties these little things that you use to make an I-cord or like a piece of cording. So it's a term that has different meaning for different folks, but what was the usage for the person that you...
It looked just like the one that you had.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was printed in 2 pieces with like this at the end, and so that you would get, because of course you'd have to print them flat, so then like that, and then twist it so that you had the 2 different, those end pieces are on 2 different planes.
They are,
That's
yeah.
the ply plane, yeah. So
the idea behind it is that you can wrap a longer loop with it being on 2 different planes, because you wrap it in like in a figure 8 kind of. I haven't actually tried doing it, but I have several like videos of this is how you do that. Because I have had to rewind balls back into hanks if it's something that I'm not using, because wool has a tendency to stretch if you wrap it too tightly.
mm-hmm.
That's sorry, weird fiber tangent, but
that's
really cool.
Together though, right? Like
yeah. And then like, I know one of our staff members made a seam gauge that for sewing. So it's a square, and then it's got notches on each side that are a different thickness, between like a 1/2 inch and a 1/4 inch, so that you can lay it against a seam that you're sewing and make sure that you're sewing it to the right consistent depth. I've seen like stitch markers for knitting. One of these aren't 3D printed, but I designed these swatch rulers that look like Game Boys. They're kind of hard to see.
Is that one you did on the laser cutter?
Yeah, these ones I did on the laser cutter. And like this sock ruler is something that I did for, measuring how much you've knitted with socks. So like I'm all about the utilitarian purpose for that. It's so cool. Like I made this and now I'm using it. Like I love the figurines, but I love the how ubiquitous like you're literally limited by just your imagination. Mm-hmm. You're starting from absolutely nothing, and then like magic, it's just done. So that I always thought that was really cool. There's a website that there's a lot of folks that will post their 3D printer designs for free for download. Do you remember what that website is?
I think the most popular one is Thingiverse.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Thingiverse. And there's a lot of cool stuff on there that you can use. I have had trouble taking designs that people have posted, putting them back into the software to modify them, because when you get it to a certain stage, like when you have the STL file, it's hard to get it back into either Fusion 360, FreeCAD, or anything like that, and then adjust it. It's kind of like one way. You can't really go back on that. But there's a ton of cool stuff on there to print. And the customization, again, like we have all our soldering irons at the library, and the cords, you wrap them around and then you got to finagle them to right, for storage. So we just made little cord clips that you can hook on the end of it, like you have on a vacuum or something like that to hold that together. So that's another utilitarian use. And Nancy, I'm glad that you showed those off. Those were those were pieces that were designed by you and cut out and engraved on the laser cutter at the library.
Yep.
So that is another tool that we have in the Secret Lab that has a ton of uses. You showed off a couple utilitarian uses, but they're still cool, right? The little Game Boy one, that's something different. And then so you can do a lot of different things on the laser cutter engraver too. That's a really cool tool that we have, and we were doing programming with that in the winter and early spring as well this year. We had good turnouts for that. People really liked that. And you used Inkscape, correct?
I did, yeah. Okay. And that's that was one of the funnest parts for me, was you introduced me to Inkscape, and I was doing the training with you to learn how to use the laser cutter. And then I was lucky enough to have all of this time to just mess with it and figure it out and watch. Inkscape is great because it's an open source program and it's fully supported by the designers, and there are a ton of tutorials of every single aspect that you can use it for. And Inkscape is really more for like 2-dimensional graphics. It's not so like on the laser cutter, they're 2-dimensional designs, but like the thickness of the line and then the type of line that it is designates whether it's a engrave or cut. So like the printer knows to look for specific things for like engrave versus cut. So figuring that out and making sure that you get in each individual element of those correct I went through 5 of these before I got one that was workable. So like it's totally a trial and error process. And I feel like as I was doing it, I was getting better and getting more consistent of like I'm actually hitting the points that I need to, of like making sure it's all correct. But I get that customization option of other folks' designs. I can't imagine going into another person's design and trying to figure out how I want to change it. It would almost be like I'd rather just like take the idea and build it right from my own. My dad's told me the same thing about computer programming and coding. He's like, I'd rather just write my own code than actually have to fix somebody else's.
Because that little thing that you learned from that 2-minute YouTube video that you used to fix whatever problem you had on either one of those things, like that's going to be hard for the next person to discover, you know, re-engineer and all of that. So
it's almost like your own fingerprint. Everybody does things a little bit differently, and everybody's thought process or approach to problem solving is a little bit different. So like you're kind of having to anticipate or almost like read somebody's mind that you've never met, of like, oh, you would do it this way, or I would do it that way. Kind of my big gripe about crochet patterns. I've talked about this before, of like, I don't know if you are assuming that I'm going to remember to do this one step that'll change the entire pattern or not. So it does. It's fun problem solving. Sometimes it gets so frustrating I just have to like walk away. Like, I can't do this anymore. So, but yeah, it's very fun, and it's very, very cool. That was watching patrons and other folks who are coming into the library, their things that they wanted to do and cut and engrave and make with the 3D printers and the laser cutter is so cool. We had somebody come in and they wanted to engrave a bowl or a vase for somebody's wedding anniversary, and the laser cutter can do that.
Yeah.
They wanted to, cut out acrylic sheeting for a specific project. Laser cutter can do that too, and it was just so fun to see all the different uses for it.
Yeah, you really are only limited by your imagination and the size of the bed of whatever you're making,
exactly.
right? I mean, you can bypass a little bit, like the naughty, right, was printed in 2 parts because we had to turn it diagonally to sit it to get one half, then print the other half. So you can make bigger objects. But I mean, that's any tool. One of my, I don't know if I've told you guys this. A couple friends of ours were getting married, and they were going to, it was a black couple, and they wanted to jump the broom afterwards, which is an African-American tradition at weddings. And so I got the idea in my head that I was going to make the broom, right? So my lathe bed is only, I think, 24 inches long. That's the longest piece of wood that I can do on there. But I was determined, and that's the kind of thing that gets me motivated to do, right? Like, I don't just pick it up, but I have this particular project. So I did the handle in 3 parts and had screws and glued them together. And then I found this one company in California that sold broom corn. And so you have to buy it in a particular, and so then I went through and figured out how to attach it to the post, and I had to make a special clamp that was like this wide to clamp the broom corn so that I can then just stitch it. And it turned out awesome. I was really, really proud of that. But that's kind of, I was limited by the size of my bed, but only as far as finding a solution to it. I had to put it together in 3 parts, which was fine. That worked out. But that was another cool one. And I think they've still got it hanging in their kitchen. They're down in North Carolina now. So Okay.
Like that did not go well for me, but they're so pretty and they're so cool. I've seen a lot of like at art fairs and craft shows and stuff, handmade brooms, and like I think they're really awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I got one more piece to show you guys.
Oh, that's great.
This is one of the bowls that I've made on the lathe. I think it's a figured maple, but it's got these nice.
Wow, yeah.
What are those? Are those like scars in the wood or?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's because it's against the grain, right? I don't know if
Yeah.
you guys can see close up. The grain is going this way, and then you've got this piece that goes in there. It might be a little bit of what do they call it? Spalting, which is a mold, right? That grows in the wood. So if you use spalted maple, you do have to wear a mask when you're cutting and sanding, because it does release the mold into the air. But yeah, this is one that I'm really proud of. And then the other thing that I have that is another utilitarian object, I've made several of them, I don't have any with me, is custom taps for home brew kits.
Oh, cool. That's cool.
Because that's something that you can get creative. The one that I got really into, and I shouted out Woodcraft already. One of my other go-to places for dimensional cutoffs, so already plain, squared, jointed, exotics, and they also have a bunch of rough lumber too, is Armstrong Millworks in Highland Township. It's on 59, just east of US 23. And they do custom cabinetry, all that kind of stuff, bars, countertops. But then in their workspace, they also, when they have extra pieces laying around, they will make them dimensional. So like I said, square them up perfectly. Because I have a planer, I don't have a joiner. The joiner squares it, and then the planer gives it its thickness. But my first one that I did with that, I was building it for my good friend for his homebrew kegerator, and I slapped together a couple pieces of Purple Heart with I think Paduke in the center, which is like a reddish wood, and then I carved a hop out of mango and screwed that on the top of it. So it's that was another one that I was really proud of. Those are and that's another utilitarian piece that can actually be used and displayed and stuff like that. So
for I feel like it's worth mentioning, because I didn't know this until I had actually seen pictures. For folks that haven't seen Purple Heart wood before, it's literally purple.
It is. Oh, I wish I could get. I have they call them ribs, and they're wooden ribs that we used in pottery. So it gives you something to kind of hold against to help create the form as it's spinning around on the wheel. I'm like, on the thing. Good. Use your words. Brain fog. So anyway, yeah, I got that Purple Heartwood. Is really, it's been a beautiful wood to use. I also have another one that's red, and I can't remember what it is. But anyway, yeah, it's
almost like an eggplant purple.
Yeah, it's the best.
An aubergine color. It's so pretty. I ran across it first with dice boxes for D&D, for polyhedral dice. That was the first time that I ran across it. I was like, how is this even natural? There's also woods that like glow under blacklight, that fluoresce under blacklight. And as like a former geologist, I was like, oh, rocks will do that. That's, nothing new. And I was like, but there's a tree that does that. It was so cool. The woodworker that I watch the most on YouTube is Peter Brown. And he's done almost just a ton of different videos of, this is this exotic wood, we're going to do a project in it. And the one that almost made me ill was he was carving a bracelet with the wood that glows in the darker fluoresces under UV light, and then he put it under a strobe. And I was like, why? It's so cool, but oh my God, my head. It was very trippy and very, oh my God. So.
The magic of YouTube.
Yes, the magic of videos in general.
That's great. Well,
do we want to check in with projects that we've done in the last week, or do we want to skip that bit?
I think maybe you do.
I don't know. I did my earrings.
Yeah, your earrings are great.
It sounds like you have something to show.
I did it for the thumbs. And that was really it. I forgot the painting that Chris and I have been working on. We were doing a peacock paint by number, and you can actually see the peacocks at this point. We finished enough of it, so
Oh, nice.
I'll bring that back next week and just throw that on camera and be like, "This is my painting."
I can't remember what last week was busy. I had a lot of meetings. Well, you know what? I'm at that point on my shawl where I'm at that last section of lace. So I've got 9 rows of lace and then the binding off, and it's going to be done. And so that's exciting.
Nice. Yeah.
Because all those meetings, I was able to just do my garter stitch section.
Yeah, I did do some knitting at meetings last week too.
Yeah. That's I had a couple Zoom vestibule shifts that were really, really dead. So I just finished the ribbing on the cowl that I started. So I'm ready to start the color work. I just have like 2 more rows of stockinette to do, and then I'm going to join on my first color. So moment of truth, can I do color work or not? So I'm excited. It'll be fun.
In a phase of like, I'm stuck on a couple projects for programs, and it's like, well, I don't know what I want to do. Like one of them's a screen printing. I'm like, I don't know what image I want to screen print. So I've gone through like 3 different things, and then I'm trying to find an image online, or am I just going to draw the picture? Or it's like, yeah, so I need to go take a walk and let that kind of figure itself out. Yeah.
Well, I think that's everything we have. I'm sorry, before I do that, Lucy, Toby, no projects?
Just still knitting. Yeah, Toby?
A lot of music, a lot of music. Yeah, a lot of music. And I got to throw out a plug. Episode 8 of the Saturday show has a making theme. So we cover some of the stuff that we do in the Secret Lab. Just briefly talk about some of the projects that I've done, some of the musical instruments that I've made. And so if you guys are looking for anything kid-oriented about makers, maker spaces, episode 8 of the Saturday show is a good place to start.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks.
Saturday show is also very fun.
Do you put your stuff on Bandcamp or anything like that with your music, or are you just not there yet? Or
No. You know, when someone asked me when we were leaving the library in March, what are you going to do? And my immediate response was, I'm going to write and record an album. And I guarantee you, by the time we're done here, there will be an album, but it won't be Toby. It'll probably be Otto Turtle Sings. So
focus has changed a little. Yeah.
Yes. So
that's really cool.
I don't know. I love hanging out in my garden.
Yes.
So groovy. Yeah.
You know, it's a lot easier to do that when you don't have to go into work, right?
Yeah.
and have everyone talk to you like, oh, you did that? Oh, it's just whoever saw it, and it lives there, you know?
Yeah.
It's far enough out that when we go back to work, nobody's going to ask.
Yeah. Yes. Otto and Toby, Otto the rapping turtle. Yes.
Nice.
So
That's awesome.
Cool.
Love it.
Well, I think that's all we have for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Toby, for being on Crafty Chat with us.
Thanks for having me.
Have you?
Yeah.
Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, check out some of the other videos that AADL TV has to offer. We'll be back next week for episode 15. In the meantime, stay safe. Don't forget to love each other. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.